All right, so we have the honor of having Laurie Cantwell today, who is an accomplished data analyst, an experimentation specialist, and currently CRO analyst at Codal, which is an award-winning web design and development consultancy. So having said all that, I already know that this is going to be an incredible chat. We've already had some chats as well before, and it's always super, super interesting. So there's going to be a lot of value here. So I just want to start off by saying thank you very much for being here today, Laurie.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Love it.
It's
Love it.
exciting.
If we start off just at the very beginning, always nice to have a bit of context, a bit of backstory. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did everything start, and what are the steps that you took in order for you to be here today?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about over 7 years now. And if I'm honest, I kind of got into this by accident.
Okay.
So when I was finishing my kind of degrees, I guess I'll take a little bit of a step back, but so I've always kind of been, technically minded into psychology and all that kind of stuff and into analytics. But when I was finishing my master's degree, I got an internship with a digital marketing startup. So they kind of took me on, they taught me all the things about SEO, PPC, and CRO was part of that. So that's kind of where I got the basic understanding of things. Worked on small projects like landing pages here and there, stuff like that to kind of align in with SEO a bit. And then when I was ready, to take the next kind of step, I kind of ran into a place that basically said to me that, we'll pay for your CXL certification for you to learn all of the things with us and to help us add the service into our offerings with another digital marketing agency. So that's what I did. And I was there for quite a while and I got a lot of really awesome hands-on experience with them. And then in the last couple of years, took a step out to more the UX side to kind of develop my skill set even more, and then have since come back into the experimentation and testing space. So that's kind of my
Nice.
sort of journey.
Well, we're already having CXL paid for is always a really nice plus, right? Because it definitely isn't on the cheap end. So I'm curious, actually, thinking then you have a very, very interesting start, where you kind of learned directly from agencies already. You said like PPC, SEO, CRO. What was it, other than the fact that you already said you loved psychology, data, that you thought, okay, let me go deeper into the overall CRO, UX, instead of thinking, okay, let me learn more about paid ads now, or like the classic route I feel most people generally take.
Yeah, for CRO, for me, it was more of that marriage with analytics, kind of design, and really that psychology and how those combinations influence people and just people in general, that kind of behavior and all that stuff around it. I thought was really, really interesting how, I hadn't really thought of websites in that way until I started to pay attention to it. And then once you kind of see it, you see it applies to so many things. And it was that sort of marriage where you could be a bit creative with the analysis that you were pulling in. And that to me is, yeah, just.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, I agree. And especially, you said once you're aware of it, and we talked about Amazon the other day. And sometimes if you're not aware of it, you just think, oh, this is nice on the website. But once you do know a bit experimentation, psychology, you're like, I know what they're trying to test here. Or I know that this is, probably an A/B test or something. So you definitely look at websites differently. And what I also found interesting is you said that you're getting a lot more people reaching out to you, asking about, how can they get into CRO, what do they need to learn, and all that. So I guess there are sort of two questions on that. First of all, why do you think that there's such an increase in people looking to join the CRO industry?
Yeah, so that's something that I've really been noticing, especially in the last, like this year specifically. I've been getting a lot more contact on LinkedIn and just from people around me, either being like, I'm new to it, how do I get into this? Or I want to make a change to this area rather than this other area that I'm in.
Mhm.
And I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from. I think some of it might be just maybe there's just more online business in general. Um, more opportunities just by sheer volume. And I also am wondering if it's a bit that maybe more businesses are starting to realize the importance of experimentation, and having that data-driven kind of insights and that sort of stuff to help back what they're doing.
Mhm.
You know, I think over time, things have, as technology advances and stuff just keeps changing so fast, so quickly, the strategy is getting harder, and I think it's kind of reaching the point where you need to be doing some type of experimentation or analytics to really keep competitive edge with your business, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree in terms of like keeping that competitive edge, doing what has always worked. I think maybe doesn't work too much now. Like you said, there's so many more businesses coming up as well. If you're not doing some sort of research to know your customers best, or experimentation to just get better by 1% every single day, yeah, potentially, yeah, then in that case you'll be left behind. And then the sort of follow up question on that is, when people ask you like, how can I actually get into this space? With your experience now, what do you tell them? Like, how can they actually get into this space and start learning and maybe even getting their first job or opportunity?
Yeah, I think if you don't have any experience at all in any of it, and if you're able to, because it is a bit expensive, try to get like the CXL certification or any other type of kind of relevant qualification. Or just there's so many free resources online, to be honest. Like CRO has really good stuff. Like just learn from free resource, like connect with people on LinkedIn. I think in our community and or industry, I'm sure like that's, I mean, that's how we met, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody's so welcoming and friendly. Just reach out to people. Like, don't be afraid. Cause I think our industry particular is like, everybody's happy to teach and learn from each other. And so it's a really welcoming space for the most part. And I would say that. I know it's a bit of networking, but whatever. It's not as scary as other places can be. And I would also say to really look at building up your data skills. So knowing statistical methodologies, knowing data warehousing, like all that kind of stuff. So when you are running your, when you do start to run your experiments, you know how to make them sound, right? You don't want to just kind of be throwing stuff all over the place. You need it to be, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
robust.
exactly. Yeah, 100%. And quickly on the point you just made in terms of like how welcoming everyone is, that's definitely something I've noticed as well. Because I was more in the paid ads, Facebook ads space before, and it's crazy how everyone is super open, welcoming, encouraging in the CRO space. And also, what you said, CXL can be expensive. I was lucky enough. A quick shout out to my brother actually for last Christmas, he actually bought me, I think it was 1 or 3 months of CXL.
Oh,
And
cool.
I had that pressure of thinking, like, I got to learn as much as possible quickly because he's not going to pay for another month because obviously, it is expensive. But yeah, that is definitely true. What you said then, which I found very interesting with, understanding the data part of it a lot more and making sure that everything is sound. What are then some mistakes that beginners maybe make sometimes? It could be, not having enough of statistical significance. It could be loads of things, but what are, in your experience, some of the misconceptions in terms of the data and the numbers?
I think some of them, off the top of my head, are calling your test too early.
Yeah.
And I think so this is like when I first started. I don't know how much of a situation this is anymore, but we were using a testing tool that doesn't exist anymore, and that like we had to pull our numbers. Like that was often reporting inaccurate numbers, right? So we had to do a lot of manual analysis on our own. Um, to make sure that they were kind of meeting the statistical requirements that you really ideally want them to meet. I appreciate it's not perfect though, so
Yeah, yeah.
but so I think those are probably some of the biggest ones. And then some of the others I can think of is maybe not having your tests aligned to a wider strategy. So
Okay.
just kind of like testing here and there, things that aren't, they're fine to test, but at least in my experience and the better results I've gotten is when they're aligned to a wider business strategy or something that you're working towards. Um, yeah, I think those are probably some of the biggest ones. I'm sure I can think of more, but off the top, that's.
Yeah. Those are
Oh, I got one other one. And
perfect.
like, don't sleep on simplicity. Like sometimes people want to go big really early, and there's a
Mhm.
time and a place to go big. And there's also a time and a place for simplicity, and don't sleep on it because it's really good
I
sometimes.
love those three, and actually, I want to dive in deeper with all three of those because I think they are very interesting, and there are some that I just also notice very often. The first one you said, which is don't call your test too early. Even today, actually, I was on a call, and a test is performing really well. But then with your experience, how do you convince or explain to the client that, okay, it's been 5 days, 7 days, it's performing really well, but it's not a winner yet. They're like, it's great, the numbers are up, it's a winner, just implement it. That's not the thing, but how would you sort of go about that and tell them in a way where even someone that's very metric driven, they're like revenue, great. How can they sort of understand that they do need to wait a little bit longer?
So, in my experience, I would say to them, oh, it's a difficult one because it kind of depends on the person. So sometimes I've actually had more of the opposite experience than that one, to be honest. Like I've had more people wanting to kind of just keep going and going and going, which is good, but also kind of then, has some challenges that come with that. But for people who want to turn it off really early to get really excited, I know it's easy to get excited. But you need to kind of, it's almost like critical thinking, right? Like you have to separate your kind of emotion from it and understand that there's fluctuations that happen every single day on what you're doing. So making sure that your days match up and making sure, I guess, basically just telling them that, there's a risk of kind of, I'm not answering this question very well. I'm really sorry. We're gonna have to cut that part out.
Yeah, no, no problem. No
I'm
problem
going
at
to tell you why, because my neighbor just got home. It was
all.
completely distracting me. Just completely lost my entire train of thought.
No problem at all. But yeah, I have the
Sorry.
same. With my neighbor, actually, sometimes I don't know what they're doing, but when they're on a call, it's ringing so bloody loud, and you can just hear it throughout the entire house. So no problem at all. I'll ask that question again.
It's home really early too. He's not usually back now. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. Sorry.
No problem. Okay. So the question I asked. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. I'll try not to laugh. I'll stay focused. So, so as you were saying, the 3 points you actually just mentioned are super interesting, and I get them on quite a daily basis. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper into all three of those parts. If we go deeper into the first one, which is not calling tests too early. I had the situation today where a test was looking really good. It's only been 5 days, so for someone that's really focused on revenue, metrics, numbers, they don't maybe understand why you should let it run a little longer. How can you explain that to them that they should wait maybe at least 2 weeks before you actually pull the trigger on that decision?
Yeah, so I think usually in that setting, tying it back to making sure that what you're running is actually going to, like, from an e-commerce perspective, making sure that you're running that to this
Mhm.
to a point where that that's actually going to increase your revenue. Like that's usually tying it back to revenue, or your bottom line will usually be the thing that makes people listen to you the most in that kind of setting, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. If actually you sort of show them what they should or shouldn't do, it tends to just work better.
Yeah.
Then the second part you talked about was, tying it back to strategy. I'd love to answer to that one actually, or go deeper just afterwards. And we go to the third one, which is, there's a time to go big, and there's also a time where simplicity works really well. Can you go a little bit deeper into that one? Because I found that one very, very interesting as well.
Yeah, so you hear a lot. I don't want to be this person, but I'm about to be this person. Like about like buttons, like optimizing button colors, all this sort of thing. And people kind of like, okay, I get it, like whatever. But there is, there is some validity in those types of tiny little tweaks and changes. So when you do the iterative changes, you can increase your like conversion rate over time with that. Um, and chop and change things in a more maybe like safer environment if you're a bit risk adverse. And then there's times where you can be a bit more intrusive with your test design, or you could be disruptive with your test designs. And I
Mhm.
don't mean that like negatively, just, the bigger changes you're doing, the more impact that could have negatively or positively on your customer base. So I think there's a time and a place for all of it, and all of it can feed into your wider strategy with what you're trying to do.
Okay, that's interesting. So would you say when you start off maybe with a new account, a new client, you tend to go for the smaller ones, the smaller tests, because you don't have all of that data to confidently make those bigger swings? Is that it?
Yeah, so usually when we're starting out, I'll kind of take things in a more iterative approach, especially as we're kind of still doing some of that analysis, doing more, we do quite a really large discovery piece. So in that kind of setting, you're sort of building up those building blocks for that project. And over time, especially once you're building up that relationship with them, you can really start to ramp up your testing to be a bit more disruptive. And if that's necessary in order to meet the goals of what you're working towards. I don't know if that makes sense,
It
but
does 100%, yeah. And actually, I think that ties in beautifully to the second point you made, but it's the third one following up on all that, which is the strategy. You know, you build those roadblocks. How can Because I know sometimes maybe some beginners, what they do is they just test, you know, left, right, and center, and there's no sort of a framework, there's no longer term vision approach to what they're doing. How can you actually build that strategic, I would say, roadmap or framework to know that, okay, maybe within the next 1, 3, 6, 12 months, we know what we should be focusing on and we have that framework to follow?
yeah, so I think it depends on the structure of the company that you're in, because it's going to be very different from agency to in-house to, everything else that goes on. So it kind of is dependent what the size, what you have access to. So generally speaking, I try to build out our roadmaps. And just as a side note, that like frameworks are really, really help. I personally think frameworks are really, really helpful.
Okay.
Process is also helpful, but I personally feel it's important to not get rigid into your process. Because what we do is a bit fluid, right? Like there's a little bit of bend and flex and what goes on. But for me, when I'm building out my roadmaps, I try to work with the wider team, especially stakeholders, to know what their kind of we'll say OKRs. It doesn't need to always be OKRs, but and it's very company dependent. But what their goals are for those, however long they're going to be with us, right? Like X amount of quarters. Get the wider objectives, and then once you're starting getting all your analysis in and doing that stuff, seeing where your metrics are on fire, like all that kind of business, what's really going on in in the accounts. Um, Thinking about what can you do with your tests that can align to those goals, like those tactics that kind of um, help to support reaching those goals in the long term. So it's sort of a, you know, I can't think of the words, but it's a bit of like two processes, frameworks of one in a way. I have
Okay.
no idea if I explained that well, but I'm sure somebody will understand it.
No, it makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah, instead of just thinking, okay, you do your work, it's like, okay, what are the wider business goals of, you said, the stakeholders? How can we adapt our testing strategy to that so that we're going towards the common goal? That's it, right?
Yeah. And then if you're at a place or you have access to, or you're working with other services like PPC, or SEO rather, like you can really tie, and with PPC, but you can really tie the CRO into that.
Hmm.
So you can be a lot more strategic with that. You can help support landing pages. You can really bend and flex what you're doing, where you're testing,
Yeah.
to accommodate a lot of different strategies. And so in a way, yeah, it kind of impacts everything.
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
if you're able to have it impact everything.
Yeah, and it's funny, the more I also learn about CRO, the more I notice or I realize that there's a lot to learn, right? Because if you are working with the SEO team, you need to know some SEO, because if you don't, they're going to have their idea, you're going to have your idea, and it's just not going to work at all. But there
Yeah.
is a way to try and make sure that both parties win. Same with PPC, same with email marketing. With CRO, you just have to know the wide picture, don't you? It's
Yeah.
a,
It's never like you're never done learning ever.
at all. No.
Constantly learning. And that's a big reason why I stepped away a bit, just to get full on UX experience. So I was a UX strategist for a couple years, just to get that different way of thinking, more of a design thinking approach, which has really helped me then work with design teams. So I understand what they're talking about, but I can come at things from a little bit of a different perspective than they might be coming at things with, right? So it just helps you learn everybody's language and work more cohesively together, and then you get better results.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'd love to go also a little bit deeper into that UX, part of your journey. Just before we do that, though, you mentioned, working with the stakeholders, making sure everyone has a clear common goal. If we talk a little bit about, getting buy-in from stakeholders, sometimes with it could be user testing, it could be different research methods. It makes sense to us. How can you convince them to maybe invest a little bit into doing some customer interviews, user testing? How can you get buy-in from the stakeholders generally?
I think getting at least since I've come back into the space, I think getting buy-in from an experimentation perspective is a bit easier than it used to be. I think like what I was saying before, I think people are understanding that you need to have data-driven kind of support to what you're doing. Getting buy-in for, especially for moderated user research, is very challenging. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it, which don't help it. I think there's misconceptions that it can be expensive and that it can be time consuming. It doesn't need to be either of those things, but getting that buy-in is quite difficult. But I think moving forward, it you know, I don't know. I like to think it's going to be a slow burn increase to people understanding that, especially if you're starting to understand your data, you will eventually start to understand you need the qualitative part of that as well to really bolster what you're doing. It's hard. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's challenging.
But I do agree with you that since, like we just said, more people are asking you how can you get into the CRO space, which means that there's more just common understanding in CRO, why you need it, what the different elements are, and like you said, maybe you have the data, you have the where, but it's also good to have the why. Why are people dropping off? And I think
Yeah.
if people have that mindset of okay, I want to understand it, they're going to be probably more likely to buy in, right?
Yeah, and it's not I think it's really important to mention that it's also like for end users specifically. So there's lots of buy-in for like kind of stakeholder moderated research, which is great, but you need to talk to your customers. Like that's just really important. And that's the piece specifically that's hard to that in my experience has been challenging to kind of get in place historically. So
Yeah, I agree. And then let's say you do manage to persuade or convince the different stakeholders that they should invest maybe more time, more money, more resources, just more energy into getting that qualitative data, the voice of customers. How can you then turn those findings into actual insights where you're like, okay, we can test here, we can improve this. How can you actually do that?
So obviously you would kind of troll through everything everybody said. You kind of, do your analysis piece with that, break it all down, find your common themes and problems that people are having, and then you can start to look at those, feed those into your metrics, and start to build out a strategy around that. So I think, also, I guess with collecting that information, sometimes people might also think that you need to do every single thing that your customers are asking for, which
Mhm.
isn't true. It needs to align with your business goals as well. So it all kind of it's just another piece you can add to your kind of strategy,
Yeah.
really.
I like that. Yeah, definitely. Because especially when you look at, maybe some surveys or what people say during calls, it's true. If you try and do everything that they would like you to do, you're always gonna add this, remove this. It's gonna be a never-ending story. And then I think this could be a good time to sort of bring in AI as well, because when you have hundreds or maybe even thousands of responses, I don't think any of us want to spend our entire day going through every single response from someone.
Yeah.
How do you find that AI has helped you or people in your sort of team or surroundings? How has AI helped there to just filter maybe through data or just allow you to be more effective as a CRO expert practitioner, everything?
Yeah, so AI definitely helps speed up some of that kind of stuff. It can help you sift through all that kind of mundane. Oh, I'm sure somebody somewhere really loves doing that, to be honest.
Probably.
It just speeds that up a bit, helps you kind of find the patterns a bit faster. But I still maintain you got to check that stuff though, because it is not like it's helpful, but it's not the answer right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, you mean that it sort of tells you a little bit, but it's not the end all be all. Like just rely 100% on that
Yeah.
because it does
Yeah.
still have its flaws, and
Yeah.
humans are maybe still better at analyzing it. That is.
I think it helps. I think it's kind of like an assistant to you. But it's, if you're gonna use I mean, I don't want to get on a complete side tangent, but the prompts,
Yeah.
I mean it's garbage in, garbage out, right? You gotta make sure that you're um instructing it really, really well, and then maybe you can rely on it a bit more. But I'm just a bit hesitant with it. It's helpful, but it's not the answer
Yeah. True.
yet.
Yes, true. But okay, so what I'm getting from this is everyone needs to become a prompt engineer in order to get better responses from the prompts. But yeah, I think it
That makes
was
sense.
Sam Altman that said it's going to be the quality of the ideas you have, and then the way you can ask that in a prompt, which is going to give you the quality responses back, and that's
Definitely.
a skill in and of itself.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think there was one other thing I was going to say about it, and I forget what it is now. I don't know. I'll come back.
Yeah, no,
There's
no.
a method to this. There's like all kinds of chaos in my mind. I'm trying to be very like,
Well,
yeah.
it's perfect. As I'm asking my next question, I'm sure we'll just come back and interrupt me at any time. There's no problem with that. If we go a little bit back now to you stepping back and focusing on UX, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about? So you said that it helps to understand a little bit, where they're coming from. Maybe it's in terms of design. So again, you can work together. What are the things that you've learned when you took that step back that you think more CRO practitioners should know about, or that can just help them up their game?
I think the biggest thing I learned from it was actually getting that experience with the moderated user research. So what I can do now is actually do like end user interviews. Um, you know, kind of go through all the analysis with that, know how to structure them really well so you're not biased when you're asking the questions. That's something I see quite a lot, to be honest, around user testing is a lot of biased questioning. Um, and it just kind of helps with the data integrity that you're collecting. And that was probably the biggest takeaway I learned from it. And then that has since then helped me with our research and UX teams to really kind of put that all into practice.
Okay,
So for me, that was the biggest one. But
that makes
oh, another one also is probably workshopping. So I don't know how, and I mean like interactive workshopping, like kind of going through your fog framework, like all these sorts of things to help to, just prioritize what you're doing and getting people up and moving. I think that was actually a really useful skill that I've learned off that experience as well.
Okay, so two very interesting things you said there in terms of, yeah, so biases, in terms of like the way you ask the questions, that's also going to impact the responses. That's something I've noticed. It's a little bit better now, but it's something I've been struggling with user testing. I see that the questions I'm asking, I can, as the user is reading it, I'm like, this is going to be a bad answer because I didn't ask this the right way. How can you how can you actually ask questions in a way that it's just good data, it's trustworthy data, and it's not biased negatively or positively? How can you try and minimize the bias basically in the questions?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's
Yeah,
tricky.
I can imagine.
You got to really look at your questioning and like your actual questions and rewrite them and rewrite them and rewrite them until you get to the point where it's not biased. It's very challenging. Yeah.
Is it maybe I guess it also depends in terms of like the industry, the age range of the people you're questioning, right? There are probably so many factors that come into play, and there's probably not one question that works for everyone everywhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you just want to not be leading. That's really my biggest takeaway from that is just to try to be as unleading as possible, non-leading as
Yeah.
possible.
So is it like, okay, let's say I'm a big fan. I let me try and find a good example. I'm a big fan of a certain product. It's trying to ask the question without saying like, okay, this is a great product. Do you
Yep.
agree? It's more like, okay, what are your thoughts on this product without giving any sort of information as to what they should think or how you are thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm terrible at coming up with examples on the fly.
Same
I
as you can
can't give you one
see.
right now, but yeah, it's basically that.
Okay, okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. But yeah, like I said, in terms of user testing, the first ever user testing sessions I did were terrible because, like I said, the quality of the responses just wasn't there. It's slowly getting better, but it is, I guess, again, a skill in and of itself to be able to ask, unbiased questions.
Yeah. We had I worked with a researcher, like he was like a, academic, like full-on researcher, and I learned a lot of really good information from him. So he was really, really good at like asking like unbiased questions. Um and kind of when we went through sentiment analysis and all that kind of stuff. So that was really beneficial. But yeah, it's a learned skill. Like most people just, I think just by natural conversation, you ask a lot of leading questions. People tend to kind of project their own universe into everybody else's universe. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Knowing it. So you said some sentiment analysis. That's something, again, super interesting. Can we go a little bit deeper into that as to what you learned there, how you can take it into consideration?
Um, yeah, so I didn't do tons and tons of it. Like he did the bulk of it, if I'm gonna be totally honest. But that was really useful just to kind of put it into practice, especially when we were at the time we were looking at a brand new food-based product that was going to go to market. And he kind of ran this, so this is more quantitative, but he kind of ran through an unmoderated survey to people, and in that had some sentiment analysis, and that was really helpful when looking at things like the packaging
Mhm.
and people's their own biases towards packaging and like healthy, like sustainability, healthy eating, all that kind of stuff that was going into this whole piece. And that was really helpful for that. And I also found it to be quite helpful just generally around some of those, like when we were doing like redesigns for products and stuff, getting that kind of little piece of this makes me feel happy, this makes me feel bad. Like having that sort of insight was really, really beneficial to help move some of those kind of designs around. I'm
Okay,
trying
cool.
not to touch on an NDA there, so hope
Yeah,
that's all
well,
right.
that's it leads me perfectly into the sort of next question I was actually wondering, which is something we talked about with or before, which is, accessibility or having design that is ADA compliant, not being not getting any restrictions, anything like that. Can you maybe walk us through a little bit more the importance of it and maybe the fact that not enough people are aware of it or yeah, not thinking enough about it,
Yeah. So accessibility is tricky. We are an accessibility first, company. Like that's kind of how we think about things with our designs. I learned a lot of that from the previous place that I was at with the designs, with the UX specifically. Um, and that's a challenge because the guidelines, you know, aren't global, like they're not universal guidelines. And so when you're working with places around the world, that can be quite challenging. And there's so many people, you know, there's everybody's unique and individual, right? And like you want everybody to have a good experience. There's so many people who are getting um diagnosed more and more with hidden disabilities. You want everything to work for everybody, but it's hard. And everybody tries their best, but people don't always get it right. But it's something that needs to be front of mind. Like you need to be accessibility first, and it starts with awareness. So even if you're just thinking about it with your designs, that is a good starting point in my opinion and experience, because at least you're aware of it and you are taking it into consideration when you're test building or whatever you happen to be working on. But it's definitely a tricky one. I don't have a perfect answer for it,
Uh,
unfortunately.
I don't think there maybe is a perfect answer, because again, it's like you got to think of every side. You want it to be good for conversions. You need it to be compliant, in terms of accessibility. It needs to look good as well, just from an overall design standpoint. So many things, and I think it's impossible to have every box ticked and respect everything and everyone while doing so. So, is there maybe I don't know, like a couple things people should think of. Maybe it's the coloring contrast, right? Maybe it's the
Yeah,
size of the font. Are there some basic things that, regardless of the country, the continent, like whatever, people
yeah.
can try and think a little bit more about?
Yeah, so things like color contrast, the sizing is like on mobile, the sizing functionality is a big one, like making sure that people can use their keyboard to navigate through your site. Your alt text, making sure that that's on there. So so things are like readable, scannable, like, you have all these different devices that people can use for that stuff. And I think those are some of the basics that everybody should really be adhering to.
Definitely. And I think that even in just a simple one like the color contrasting, it can actually also help with conversions because there was this test where it looked good, for people that have the sort of they can see colors just the sort of normal way, I would say, like red is red, green is green,
Yeah.
whatever. But for some people that maybe have that, they don't see the colors the classic way. Maybe the add to cart button, which is a very important button, doesn't stand out to them. So being compliant for that category also allows you to maybe have better conversion. So it's a win-win
Definitely.
for both sides.
Yeah. And it kind of, this reminds me of something that I saw. It has nothing to do with websites, but I think it's in Montreal. Oh, don't know, fact check, not sure, might be someplace else. That they use symbols like triangles, circles, whatever on their stoplights for
Yeah.
driving for colorblind people. So they can actually know when, you know, to stop or go
Yeah.
rather than relying on colors. So that's like a really good example of that. Like in the real world kind of setting, like off and
Yeah.
off digital.
Definitely. I think there's maybe also one, and I might also be like completely wrong in terms of where it is, but I think it was when I was in Holland, I saw that when the stoplight is gonna turn from like red to green, it flickers a little bit and
Oh
then
yeah,
it turns. So maybe there's like a little indicator be like, okay, it's about to change color. You just need to be sure it's gonna turn green and not red. Because if you're gonna walk as it turns red, you're gonna have a little bit of a problem. But that's a really good example. Now, before we go into, we've got some rapid fire questions
oh
for you.
no, okay.
But the one quick last question before we go into that, um, with everything you're like listening to, whether it's podcasts, conversations, whatever, what or where do you see the industry going within the next, I would say, like 1 to 2 years?
So I see just from based on my own experience and from things I see around, I see definitely more adoption with AI, specifically around automation. So automating your reports, your scorecards, just kind of again, like we touched on already, like just speeding up some of those mundane tasks. You give yourself a little bit more time to do some strategy or other productive things. Um, and I also see an increase or in more of that kind of collecting the user feedback. I think um, as more and more things kind of get optimized, especially in the digital space, it's kind of gonna it's moving the needle more and more, right? So eventually, I see it going to where that adoption of end user information qualitatively will definitely be increasing, and I think also moving CRO to using it as more of an experimentation space for the wider business, like brand awareness, using it for your sales. You can test and optimize so many facets of it, like the entire organization, really. And I see it moving out that way and maybe becoming a bit less siloed and more incorporated into other parts of the business as well. So it's not just you can have your experimentation team, but feeding that around to the different departments that you're in, if you're in a large organization or wherever you happen to be, really, even like startups or whatever, like getting people into that mindset of a culture of experimentation, I think is also going to be increasing.
Yeah, super, super interesting. That sounds like a very interesting future in terms of CRO or just experimentation generally. Because, like you said, it's not just optimizing the conversion rate of that just website. It could be
Yeah,
getting better at traffic acquisition. It could be better with retention, like you said, sales, operations, anything can be optimized and also could be just tested with generally.
definitely. And the learnings that we get off all the testing that we do feed into so much other stuff where they can feed in and they have fed in, right? Like how much industry, like how much change has gone on that you've seen around that has been based off testing that like the public doesn't get to see,
Yeah, exactly. And again, back to what you were saying before, Amazon, right? They're testing so many things, and it's not just to get more people to buy a book or buy that thing, but it's also to maybe sign in, or it's to reduce the return rate. It's just so many things you can test with, which just optimize your entire business. So a lot of exciting and interesting things. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So first one is, and this is one that I love because the answers are always so broad that there's never like one same answer. And the question is, if you could have dinner with anyone that has ever lived or that is alive, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, rapid fire.
Or you can just take the time to think because it's rapid fire, but it's actually never super rapid and it takes just another 10 minutes. So, but who are you thinking of?
Okay, not to get personal, but it would be my dad.
Okay.
Um, and I don't know who else.
You don't know who else? Okay.
I don't know. I can't think of anybody else.
Okay. Very, very
Oh,
good.
high pressure.
So, okay, well, let's go on to the next question. A much more sort of simple question, which is what's your favorite movie?
So I have a few, and they're definitely going to date me. I really like movies. I watch movies of all decades, but I have a handful from my childhood that are my favorite. So it's going to be Clueless,
Okay.
Dazed and Confused, um, Beetlejuice, Napoleon Dynamite,
Okay.
and Romeo and Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann version.
Okay. I'm gonna be embarrassed here to say that most of them I don't know them. I'd
Okay,
like to
that's
think
fine.
I know a lot about movies, but clearly I don't actually hearing that. So I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board and watch more movies, definitely. I saw on your LinkedIn you said that you love cake, which is something that I just also love. Just like dessert is just the best part of the meal. What's your favorite dessert?
Oh man, chocolate.
Okay.
Just
Any
just chocolate, just all the chocolate.
okay, just any chocolate that will do.
Pretty much, yeah. I love
Okay.
sweets, like any sweet, all of it's my favorite dessert.
It
I
is.
got one. That's a good, better answer. Banana pudding,
Oh,
absolute favorite dessert.
I mean, I'm trying to be a little bit careful in terms of what I'm eating, but the more we talk about this, the more I see myself just thinking like, let me just have one of those desserts as well. So
Yeah.
let's quickly change topic in that case. What's your preference between summer or winter?
I like spring and fall.
Okay, and any particular reason why?
They're comfortable and well, like fall's like nice because you're kind of I like the in-betweens because you're kind of getting in transitioning, crispy, comfy clothes,
Yeah.
right? And then winter happens and you're sick of well, I get sick of cold weather and then I'm like ready for like springtime clothing, liking the kind of like warm, mild air. And then summer happens, and I'm originally from a really hot climate. So I hate summer. Like I hate humidity. That's part of the reasons why I came to the UK, because it's like
Yeah. You don't
not often hot.
know.
So
The cliche of having rain and it not being too warm is a plus, I guess, for you in that case if you don't like too much, heat.
yeah, I am like the anomaly that I do like rain. So
Oh no, I'll join the club on that. Definitely, I find that nothing cozier than when you're working or watching a movie and you hear it raining outside. I love it. Like most people, they just get depressed. They hate their day. They know it's gonna be a terrible day. I know it's gonna be a great day if it's raining. So I guess we're just those weird ones. But let's just be weird together, I guess.
that's yeah.
When you're not learning or working on CRO, what do you love to learn about?
Sorry, what was the last part?
What do you love to learn about?
Um, like everything, history. I think it's really important, like not to get like philosophical, but for me, it's really important to always stay curious about stuff. And I think it would be good, like if I'm going to project my own feelings onto other people, I think it would also be beneficial to people to also be curious and just learn about different cultures, history, like music, all of it. I just want to learn everything about everything while I'm
Nice.
here.
Nice.
So,
Love that. I think curiosity is super important. And with you, maybe it gives you a different perspective on certain things, right? If you
mhm.
just think of, let's say, even CRO, you just think of it from that one perspective, but maybe you learn about, I don't know, art somewhere or gardening or just something completely different, and it can connect the two. It gives you just a different perspective.
Yeah, and like not to like take this conversation all the way back, but that's something I don't know if it gets talked about, how much it gets talked about a lot, but I actually think a really good thing to do if you are getting into the space is to pay attention to what's going on, like around the world, like within your community, like because all of that stuff impacts behavior, right?
Yeah.
So all of it sort of feeds into itself, and I think that's something that is really important to also pay attention to. Pay attention to like technology, yeah, in like global events, like all that kind of stuff. It matters, right?
Uh,
So
100%. Well, even and again, like you said, not going back all the way back, but I think there was a time with paid ads where there was, or at least I know, mainly in France, where I'm currently at now, is the cost of fuel was going up dramatically. There was war. There was something going on with people being laid off from their work. All those type of things, which also impacted the cost to acquire new customers because they maybe had less purchasing power. So getting an
yeah,
understanding of the bigger picture helps you with your sort of smaller picture with its brand or your company.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Next one. What's your favorite place on Earth that you've ever visited?
Oh, Funchal and Madeira.
Where is that? I'm gonna come across as so stupid. Where is that?
So it's a little island. It's an island off Portugal. It's part of Portugal. And it's amazing. It's so pretty. It's like Jurassic Park. It's like like go there, but like I don't, but like I also want to gatekeep it a little bit, but now it's out to the world, so it's fine.
Well, we'll cut this part out. I don't think most people will recognize that place, so
Probably
it's
not.
still a
It's
secret.
so nice. I think it's really nice. I mean, it's known as like, I think it's kind of famous for being like a little bit of an old person's kind of retreat. But also if you really like walking, like hiking and stuff, it's really good for that because they got it's all cliff. It's a cliff-based island, so they have all these Levada trails and stuff, and people like to walk on those. But I like to go there because it's nice and chill and pretty, and I don't know. It's just really nice.
It sounds. I was gonna ask you if you could just repeat what that place is, but keep it a secret. I'll just
No, it's
read it
fine. I
this
can.
episode.
It's fun. It's Fun Chow and
Okay.
Madeira Island.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think like English people say Madeira, but it's actually pronounced Madeira.
Okay. I'll
So,
check that right afterwards and book my next holiday there. Let me just go there. We'll see how that goes. And then last question is, what's your favorite book if you do have one?
hmm, I I don't actually have a favorite book.
Okay.
I appreciate, this sounds so cheesy, but I appreciate all the books I read for the information they offer me.
Okay.
Um, but I will say that I really enjoy Alan Moore graphic novels, if we're going to count. I mean, I think those are, we'll count them.
Again, I'm gonna come across as the dumbest person ever here.
It's,
What
it's
does
pretty neat. Like
right?
if you've heard of The Watchmen or okay, I don't know. Anyway, he writes graphic novels are really good.
Okay.
I like
Well, I think we've learned a lot today. One of the things is that I know very little about a lot of things, so that's always a good one.
but I like a lot of like niche things, so it might just be, yeah,
Okay.
it might just be me.
So it's not just me knowing nothing about anything, basically.
No,
Okay,
no.
good to know. Either way, as every conversation with you is, it was just super interesting, super valuable, and I loved our chat. So thank you for your time, Laurie, and for anyone that wants to continue the conversation with you, or that has any questions, or they just want to follow your journey. Where is the best place for them to do that?
And LinkedIn, I
Okay.
think. Or if you want to work with me, contact Codal.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'll put both links in the description down below. But yeah, Laurie, thank you very much for your time today. Loved it, and already looking forward to our next chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. It was great talking to you.
Love it. Thank you very much.